Hey everybody, this is Mary Grothy, and you're tuning in to my podcast, Destination Remarkable, the show where I chat about my journey through life from childhood to founding 3 companies to my venture launching 2 books with Forbes. Every week, I'll dive in and unveil the highs, the lows, and even the nitty-gritty details of my journey. It's raw, it's real. Let's get started. Hey, Destination Remarkable. I'm Mary Grothy. I'm really excited to talk to you today about being offended. What a topic. Okay, this was straight from church. My pastor said maybe 2 weeks ago in the sermon, being offended is inevitable. Living offended is a choice. Ooh, that one struck me. It is so real for me in this season. I'm embracing calmness and not getting triggered anymore. Through some of my work with my coach, Doug, and reflection, especially with all the fun adversity that I got to experience in the first half of this year, I've really grown as a human, and I've been able to start separating myself from the bad in my life, the challenges, the strife, the not so good situations. I'm able to separate my emotional reaction from that. And it is an unbelievable skill to learn. However, there's something about the leftover aftertaste of being offended, because that one hits differently. So let me break this down. I'm going to give you the exercise that I use to separate myself when I'm triggered from having a negative emotional reaction versus just going along with the flow. I firmly believe I can look at the patterns in my life that even when things have gone really, really bad in my life, they've always ended up okay. And I love seeing the patterns because I've had some pretty significant setbacks in my life, and they're all learning experiences. There's always a reason that God puts those storms and obstacles on my path, because I can't be the next version of myself until I go through those. And there's always a lesson to be learned. And I'm starting to realize and see patterns in my life of things that I've gone through. I'm like, oh, well, now I can use that as part of the testimony and platform and help other people through that. So I'm very grateful for them. But I was taken on quite a journey as a CEO in this last season of my life, as you know. And I would get triggered so easily. Part of it was because I was in such a bad emotional state. I was broken, weak, weary, empty. I had nothing left. If your tank is empty, like you can't give what you don't have. So I was already running on fumes. I was very emotionally fragile. I felt that I didn't have control over my company, my people, the P&L. I was losing control of my schedule, my calendar, something that I'm super passionate about having in order so I can stay in control of my life. And I just started to realize that I was not home and present when I was missing out on some things with my son, and just emotionally was unwell. And so the quality of conversations with my family, that was poor. I was stressed out at the dinner table, not even wanting to contribute to conversation. I just had my mind racing. I would remember putting my son to sleep, and I couldn't even focus on what a beautiful gift it is to be laying with my son and being there with him before he falls asleep, because I don't get to do that forever. He's definitely not going to be allowing that a couple of years from now. He's just going to grow up and be independent. And I couldn't even cherish that moment. My mind was just racing. And I had so much negative self-talk and was in a constant state of stress and anxiety. And it just stole all my joy. It was really hard. And so as part of the work I did with my coach over the last few months, I started to tap into that of why am I allowing myself to exist in this state? And so he helped me identify the feelings that were coming through. I've spoken on this topic before. It's as simple as this. If I hold up this coffee cup to you right now, for those of you not watching on YouTube, FYI, a reminder, you can be watching this on YouTube. but I'm holding up this coffee cup. So if I hold up a coffee cup and two different people look at this, one might look at that and say, oh man, I am so jealous right now. I want a cup of coffee. I have to sit here and watch her record this episode and I'm staring at that coffee and all I want is a cup of coffee. And man, and then they get consumed because they're looking at this cup of coffee and they create that story in their head. What if there's a second person standing here and they look at this cup of coffee and they don't even think about the coffee part. They're just looking at the mug and they think, wow, that's a really cool looking mug. I love how it's branded with the House of Revenue logo. That looks really neat. Okay, it's one cup of coffee. It's the same coffee mug, yet two people can receive it so differently. And it's a point when information enters our mind, we as human beings, because we are emotional creatures, we start telling ourselves a story about the information that has entered us. And it creates an emotional reaction. It could be neutral, positive, or negative. And so what we do with that is what then dictates how the rest of the story goes. And so for me, I started to acknowledge I'm doing this to myself. My negative self-talk, my anxiety, my poor state, it's being created internally inside of me. And last time I checked, I'm only one me on the outside and me on the inside. And I'm allowing this turmoil to take place, this war inside of me. I'm letting the enemy have a field day with me. And I'm believing the enemy's lies. And it's dragging me down and turning me into not a good person. Let me tell you what happens when I get triggered. I'm a fiery, passionate creature. I've had some unpleasant reactions to things. And for those who have experienced me in those moments, I'm sorry. Like I really am. When I'm whole and healthy in my beautiful luminous being that I am on majority of days, I'm fun to be around. I am a creature of love. I love everyone. I just want to joke around, laugh, have a good time. I want to be friends. I want to be calm and just in a very relaxed, loving state. That's how I am in my natural, state. But when I'm under pressure and when my tank is empty and I get triggered, there's a side of me, and I think it's very similar where I learned it definitely is from my mom, is she was a nasty being all day, every day. Every reaction was a nasty, triggered, fiery, passionate reaction. And that's what was modeled for me every single day of my life. And so I think I was conditioned to believing that that's an acceptable way of being. It's really hard to rewrite that. And I also just watched how everyone in my family dealt with adversity because it really was modeled from the matriarch and it passed down. Like that's how we were raised. You know, you look up to your parents, you see how your parents do things, and that kind of becomes like how you learn how to do things, right? So watching my parents and how they dealt with tough situations, it wasn't pretty. They were definitely not experts in this area. And so that's how I was conditioned growing up. So when I get triggered and it turns into that fight or flight type mode, well, it's not pretty. And so I can default to what's stored in my long-term memory. And it's a pretty nasty, negative, emotional, fiery reaction. And anywho, I don't want to be that way. And I was that way a lot, especially with my executive team, just behind closed doors while we were dealing with some of the stress and strain and challenges of this last season. And I really regret how I showed up in that season because that's just unfair. I'm actually so much better than that and have so much more to give, but you can't give what you don't have. And so my coach was working with me to try to identify why I had allowed the enemy to just take over the internal operating system. And I had to consciously intercept how I was reacting and being and like rewire my thought process. And this is so funny, right? Because we go through seasons, we go through the swirl, we go through the spiral, and old behaviors can creep back in. And here I was not following my own advice. I've stood on stages in front of 500, 1,000 people, and have told them about emotional reactions and how to respond versus reacting. I've written about it. I've been published on the topic. And here I am living in a triggered, anxious state with not very good outcomes. All right. So fast forward, my coach helps me, reminds me of my own words. I do the conscious work to realize, okay, I'm doing this to myself and I'm going to rise above. And so I spent time just in the very clear mental state and was able to start visualizing the emotional state that I was in and giving a name to it and giving it color, giving it something tangible so I could see it and say, you can move on now. Goodbye. Like, leave my being. I don't want you inside of me anymore. You can't win. And so I was able to take those negative emotional feelings that I had, resentment, anger towards certain people and situations. I was able to identify what the main triggers were that would really set me off and build solutions around them on how to eliminate them from my ecosystem in my environment at work and the way that I do work. Automating certain functions and yada, yada, building reports, visibility into things. And so one by one, I was able to tackle these. And it's unbelievable what happens when you remove the clutter and remove the triggers and build systems around them so they don't trigger. But the biggest thing is I'll always be triggered. Every day there's going to be a trigger that comes through, but it is my decision if I react or respond. And so what I have learned to do is to stay in that, what could be viewed as like that meditative state where you can visually separate yourself. Like I can separate my emotional being, and it's crazy. Like when you get to this level of enlightenment. So just this week alone, I have had things pop up in my inbox, things that used to derail me. I mean, derail me to the point where I would have to call my husband in the middle of the day because I was so distraught and feeling so broken and so anxious that I would just need to hear his voice. And his voice would calm me down and I would explain and I would tell him things like, I'm so sorry. I don't know why I'm reacting this way. I don't know why it hurts me so much. I don't know why I can't get myself together. I don't know why I can't combat this anxiety. I'm so sorry. Please, just talking to me helps me. And he would be so kind and loving and supportive and helping me through it. But really, the realization is that power is already inside of me. And so now, like this week, I've had some bombs land in my inbox and I had a decision to make. Am I going to let this upset me, or I'm just going to take it for what it is? Like, hello, this is a coffee cup. Or am I going to be like, oh my gosh, look at this coffee cup. What am I going to do? This is unbelievable. I cannot believe that this just happened. How did this happen? Who did what wrong? Like, why is this happening? Gosh, I'm so horrible. I must be the worst CEO ever if I allowed something to this magnitude to happen and yada, yada. And I shouldn't even be in business and I should just sell the company and I'm awful. And why am I even here? Like, I'm being dramatic, but quite honestly, that's what I was telling myself. And hopefully that resonates with some of you because our negative self-talk can get out of control. So how about I just let it be a coffee cup? Okay, here is a coffee cup. What is the situation? What is everyone's opinion? What is everyone saying? Lovely. Now what shall we do about it? Great. Let's collaborate. We'll all be on the same page. This is the way to resolve. Step 1, 2, and 3, let's execute. Perfect. We did those 3 steps, and guess what? We solved the situation and turned it around in less than 60 minutes, and everybody is back on track and happy. Like, that is as simple as it is. Okay, now let me get to the point of this show, because I went so in the other direction, but I think that this is good background. So I have learned how to separate myself from those negative reactions. I am not perfect. I'm going to have a bad day coming up. I know it. Something's going to throw me off. I'm going to have a bad negative reaction. It's just inevitable. But I was going from having them multiple times per day to I haven't had one in, a month at this point. So I'm really excited for that. But let's talk about when you're offended. Offense hurts worse than just a trigger or a bad situation. Offense can hit into the core of where you question your self-worth. It also triggers a retaliation feeling inside of us where we get so hurt, we actually want to hurt the other person so that they can feel what we feel. And offense can last a while. So that's why they talk about forgiveness or forgive and forget. And it's oh man, I can forgive someone, but I'm never going to forget what they did to me. And it's okay, everybody has their varying levels of how hurt they are and then how long that lingers.
being offended, the word offended can have just the way that I interpret it is that it leaves that lasting impression that hits into the core. It makes me question like who I am. And it makes me feel so hurt that the initial response is defense. And then I want to start poking holes in the other person. Like they just threw rocks at me, so I want to throw rocks or stones at them. How dare you say that about me or my company or anyone in my family or a team member? Like that offends me. And now I want to offend you because guess what? You just threw stones at somebody. Look at yourself. I could throw stones right back at you. Take this, person. Like, why? Because we're humans. And quite honestly, in the moment, that trigger, like it feels good to retaliate. You hurt me and I'm going to hurt you back. Like it's just this reaction. And I have learned, and it just stood out to me when my pastor said it, being offended is inevitable. Like it's just going to happen. People are broken sinners. And I'm a broken sinner, so we're clear. Yes, I have the love and light of God pouring through me and out of me, but I am still a human and I'm going to make mistakes. I am. But on that note, living offended is a choice. I'm going to be offended. I've been offended recently. And that's okay because it's inevitable. But how I handle it, that's where I get to make a decision. So here's what I've done. I find a way to dig deep and understand why the attack came at me. Because I do believe firmly in my heart that the people that I surround myself with today are good people. And I definitely believe that everyone in my life right now, employees, friends, family, community, clients, that we have a genuine love and appreciation for each other. So if someone interacts with me in a way that I don't feel honored or respected, that's where I get offended. But I believe in my heart of hearts that it wasn't their intent to disrespect me, that it wasn't their intent to hurt me. And so there's a power in being able to rise above and say, if I truly believe in my heart that that was not their intent, then I can forgive out of the gate, forgiveness, to not even accept that feeling of I'm offended, and realize if that person went to that length to communicate to me that way or to share this with me, they are hurt. And something that I did or my team did or, a family member or whatever hurt that person at a level that they felt that this was appropriate. So the communication that was triggered was a trigger because something came their way that didn't make them feel good. So it was a reaction. So what caused the reaction? So I'm finding this way now to get to the root cause, not address the symptom. So I could immediately have my feelings hurt and be like, I'm offended and you shouldn't be talking to me that way. Or I could just rise above and be the bigger person in the room and say, generally, this person doesn't communicate with me that way. So something happened. What happened? Let me figure out what happened, the root cause of the issue, and I'm going to tackle it there. And I'm going to dive in and spend time there and show this person only what can come from God, which is mercy in the moment. They're going to be surprised that I don't adversely react. They're going to be surprised that it doesn't even faze me. They're going to be surprised when I say, I'm so grateful that you brought this to my attention. Thank you so much for sharing this with me. And then ask a follow-up question. Let's dig and figure out what caused this, because I definitely want to make it right. Whether I'm right or they're right or they're wrong, who cares? I care more about the relationship, whether it's a team member, it's a client, it's a family member, a friend. I'm not here to prove who's right or who's wrong. That's all perception anyway. There isn't some global book on this is the pure definition of, okay. That's all perception. So let me dig into what is being perceived and what happened. It's interesting. I had an opportunity to hit this head on in a scenario just yesterday. And I could feel the emotion. I was feeling disrespected. And I like to process things outwardly. I'm sure you can tell I really like to talk. And I was talking through it with a teammate. I'm like, this is what happened. This is how I received it. But I know that that's actually not truth. It's something deeper. And I was able to just tackle it head on and just addressed it head on. And guess what? Boom. 2 people got to have a very life-giving conversation and address the root issue. And like that, it got resolved. So living offended is a choice. I could have carried that with me. I could have talked poorly about the person behind their back. I could have started spreading rumors. I could have taken it home and said, well, I didn't have a good day today because guess what so-and-so said to me and how they said it. And that's ridiculous. And I shouldn't be spoken to that way. And then it bleeds into my home life. Then I start treating that person differently at work. Then a wedge comes in and I'm like, what power lives inside of us? We all have that same power. It's like the honey badger. Honey badger don't give a you know what. And I just feel like we have so much to learn from nature. But on that note, I'm going to wrap quickly here. Being offended is inevitable. Living offended is a choice. I've given you today 2 proven ways to intercept with those negative feelings and that intercept us when information is presented. You have the power inside of you. Your negative emotional reactions and your woe is me and all the nasty things that come from that, I promise you, you have the power. Enable yourself to act and intercept and provide the positive self-talk. Get the enemy out of your head. There's no room for the enemy inside of you. Then the love and light can shine through. Mercy, forgiveness, grace, and love. Those are the fruits of the Spirit. It's within all of us. Leverage it.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in connecting with me, you can find me, Mary Grothe, spelled Grothe, on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram.